Welcome home to St. Anne's. We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons. We can't wait to meet you. I know, you got to get as many of those words in as possible because we've had to say things like architecture and asparagus and aggregate, and we've had every A word known to man this Lent, so I've got to get all my alleluias in. Well, happy Easter. It's so wonderful to see you all here. I love Easter service. I'm sorry. I just love it. There's everything fun about it. We've gone through a pretty rough time, right? We've really focused on some pretty hard things, and we've come to grips with some hard things. And then we get to Easter Sunday, and we're like, oh my gosh, it actually happened. And I know that seems silly. It seem silly that we kind of reenact this whole thing every year? And so sometimes I think if you're not part of the Christian faith, it doesn't make sense. And even if you are part of the Christian faith, sometimes it doesn't make sense. We're like, well, yeah, we know what happens. This already happened. Why do we have to redo this whole thing every year? And here's the reason why. It's because as we retell the stories, we claim them as our own. And we take a part in those stories. So think of holiday dinners with your family and where they tell this story. So I know stories of my ancestors. Obviously, I never met those people, right? Never met them. But because the stories are told again and again, I can tell those stories. Those are now my stories. Does that make sense? So in the Christian tradition, we do the same thing. These are oral stories, right? So they are told again and again, and they are meant to be told again and again. And it's because as they're told and as we live them in the telling, we ourselves become part of that story. Does that make sense? So that's why we do it all the time. Plus, it's super, super powerful, and that's why the emotion is still the same. Even though we've done Easter forever, right? It's been around for a really long time. But still, the Easter message is just as powerful, and if at some point I don't cry today, it's going to be frankly miraculous, okay? So I get extra points. I get extra Cadbury eggs if I make it through the whole service without crying, right? I'm not getting any extra Cadbury eggs. It's not going to happen. So I want to tell us the story again because I think it's such a powerful story. And I think you and I have a powerful part to play in this story. So the story starts out, and I think it's kind of funny because John is obsessed with letting us know that John is the favorite. John goes through the entire Gospel of John, making sure, well, the beloved. I mean, I don't know if you know who the beloved is, but the beloved runs faster. And you're like, the beloved runs faster? Seriously, John, out of this entire story, that's what you, the holy foot race. That's what this really is. And John's like, well, I got there first. Okay, I got there first. I'm the beloved one. I'm the fastest one. You're like, good job. You kind of think he has fancy light-up sandals, right, that make him run faster? If you haven't ever asked a kid if their shoes don't make them run faster, you are not an adult. You always do, right? Kid gets, you're like, do they make you run faster? They do for John. They make John run faster. So I just think that's a funny part of the story. It's not central to what I'm going to talk about today, but I just think it's funny because it's just classic John. The part of the story that I really want us to talk about is the interaction between Mary and Jesus, because this is such a powerful part of the story. And I think because we're so pumped about Easter and so excited about Easter, sometimes we forget the lead up and where Mary actually is at this moment. So I want us to dial it back a second and really think about where Mary is. So Jesus is Mary's best friend, right? She's probably actually the beloved but it's not important. It's not important. You actually spend enough time with the text and the research, and you're like, well, it probably was Mary, but that's John. It's John, because John's fast. So they are absolutely best friends, right? Mary's whole world is Jesus. And Mary has been with Jesus throughout this entire Holy Week, right? So she's seen it all. She's been with him through all of it. Now, raise your little hand if you've never had a traumatic loss. Yeah, all right, exactly. So I want you to think about this grief. I want you to put yourself in that grief moment where you were and how all-consuming that was, right? If you've had a horrible diagnosis, if you've had a traumatic loss, any of those things, it's all-consuming. And you get it, right? You get where she is, that she just cannot function in this moment. And the last thing that she can do for her best friend is go and anoint the body, right? That's all she has. And that's because I want you to think in that moment of grief and trauma, you probably latched onto one thing that you could do. This is the one thing. I can do this thing, right? I think I made pumpkin pie I don't know how many times after my dad died because it was the one thing I could do, right? I could make pumpkin pie, and I can make a killer crust, right? But there's this one thing. We all have this one thing. We're like, okay, I can do this. I can pray. I can do this thing. This is what I can do. So this is what she's going to do, right? She's going to go. She's going to care for the body. It's gone. So the one thing that she has that helps her in her grief is gone. She can't even do that. So I want you to think of how awful and all-consuming this moment must have been for her. It was not an alleluia, alleluia, the Lord is risen moment. This was there are kids in the church, so I'm not going to say it, but oh my God, I have nothing. I have nothing. I have no way to mourn. I have no way to grieve. I have nothing. Can you kind of get where she is in this moment? Because we've all been there, right? We've all been in a place of all-consuming grief where this is everything. And we can't get out of it, right? We're just stuck. What happens to her? What happens to her in that moment? Because she can't even see Jesus. She doesn't even realize it's him because she's so consumed in this darkness. She cannot see him. What happens? He says, hey, Mary. He says her name. He says her name. And in that moment, she's like, oh my God, you're here. You are here. And in that moment, she can say, Alleluia, the Lord is risen. We are invited to do that. Every Easter, you and I are invited to do that. Because I know we all have things going on. It's just the human condition. We all have really, really tough stuff. Or we've been through really, really tough things. That's just the reality. Welcome to human life. It sucks. However, Jesus is in that moment. And that's the most powerful thing of this entire story. Not the Easter egg hunts, which are fun, and it's going to be awesome. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's going to have to be indoors this year, but it's fine. We'll make it do. Not all of the other fun stuff. The kids in all their cute clothes and us having brunch because, hello, I've never turned down a mimosa in my life, and I don't intend to now. All of those things are awesome. They are. But the most powerful part of all of this is that in our darkness, in our all-consuming terror and grief and horror, Jesus is there. Jesus shows up in that moment and says, hey, you. Hey, Meg. Hey, you. I'm right here. You can't see it, but I'm right here. And in that, then suddenly we can see the miracles around us. So I invite you this Easter. See them. See them. Hear God's voice today talking to you. And in that place, in all of that rough stuff, in all of that trauma, is your miracles? What are they? They're there. Jesus is saying, hey, I'm right here. And then we get to say, hallelujah. But seriously,
We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays.
I live for
Please
Easter.
be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons. We can't wait to meet you.